That is Utah Main Street Media, and we're so glad to have you join us today. We are going to be talking about the Utah Olympics. I have a really great guest with me. Her name is Jen, and we're just going to go by Jen because she has done a lot of research on the Olympics. I've done a little bit of research on the Olympics, and I think it's really interesting because a lot of us have been, there's a lot of excitement and energy about the Olympics coming to Utah again. We had it in 2002, and I think as a state, we would mostly consider it very successful, although there were some serious problems with it. We would say it was successful. And so we're going to talk about the 2002, but mostly the bid that Utah just kind of accepted. It's not absolutely concrete, but to bring the Olympics back to Utah in 10 years. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for your great research that you have done about the Olympics.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So we had the legislature just pass a budget, basically. They have appointed or appropriated $2.8 billion for the Olympics. They're planning on getting $4 billion. And they're saying that it's going to be 100% funded privately, that it's not going to be appropriated by tax dollars, but they're gathering this money, going to special interests and getting them to donate and saying we need $4 billion. Is that what you understand?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And they're saying that it will be 100% privately funded, but you've looked at the contract. What does the contract say if we go over $4 billion?
Then the taxpayers get stuck with the bill. And every single game has gone over at least a little. I believe 2002 was the least, and it was about 24 to 25% over, which we can even discuss that further because there was some numbers left out that we ended up.
Yes, that's really important. So let's go there. So first of all, the legislators are telling us, and those that are big proponents of bringing the Olympics back, and I am not saying that I'm against bringing the Olympics back. I think we just need to be eyes wide open. We need to be fully informed. We need to know what we're doing. And I want full disclosure. I want to say, in 2002, a lot of people got really excited about it. There was great synergy and energy. And I will admit that our company, we did very well. We made a lot of money. And a lot of other companies made a lot of money. And so there was some great synergy, and a lot of the main church in Utah was really excited, and they are excited because, let's face it, you bring these people, massive amounts of people from all over the world. It is exciting. And then they get exposure to the LDS church. They get exposure they get to go to the Temple Square. There's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement there. And a lot of businesses are going to do very well. I can promise you that there will be a lot of businesses that make great money on bringing the Olympics here. So what we want to do is we know some of the pros. We know that there's benefits from bringing the Olympics to Utah. We know that there is an excitement. It puts Utah on the map again, definitely make money off of it, bring people in. The churches, it's not just the LDS church that would benefit from having people come and introducing people to faith. This is a great opportunity that way. So I think what we want to do, we can all agree, I think that there are pluses, but I think it's really important to shine light on the full costs and what is the other side. Let's not just be Pollyanna and just this is going to be lovely. Let's look at the other costs. And as you said, Utah in 2002, we went 24% over budget. And most of the time, if you go 24% over budget in your household, Jen, how does that work for you?
We're in big trouble. We're in big trouble. Can't pay other bills, right? We're in big trouble.
24% would usually be considered a disaster, but in Utah with the Olympics, 24% was considered phenomenal. That was a huge win. In fact, they came out and said we stayed within budget when we didn't stay within budget. We went 24% over, and it's well documented. But then you were bringing up another part of that, 24% over budget, but that does not include what?
So you spend a bunch of money, and I believe in 2002, Utah spent 16 million just to basically apply to become the host, right? So you
16
spend a
million just to
lot of,
apply?
yeah, yeah. I think I don't quote me on it. I'd need to read the article again, but I think it was around that to apply and to say, hey, we want to on the bidding process, right? Essentially.
Right.
And so you have that to take into consideration. And so, what has Utah already spent of our money? Because that's not privately, right? Like, of our
Right.
money has been already spent to get the Olympics here. So, that's number one. But then, number two, what happened with the 2002 and is starting to look like it's happening here is they do infrastructure before the Olympics for 10 years prior. Okay. Because you got to remember, former Governor Mike Leavitt was trying to get the Olympics to Utah back in the 90s. So we got it in
Yeah.
2002, but he'd been trying since 1992 or even maybe before. Right. So there's all of these infrastructures that go in. Who pays for that before you ever even get the Olympics? Right. Who's
Before
paying
you
for all
even know you have it. And let's
right.
face it, you can't wait until the deal is cinched and then start thinking about where you're going to build it, how you're going to build it, the funds. Like you can't wait. You have to, the freeways were expanded, which
Right.
had to be done to bring the Olympics, but they needed to be done anyway. In fairness, I felt
Yes.
like the
Yep.
freeways need to be expanded, but it did put us on a time crunch.
Uh-huh.
But yes, so then the infrastructure isn't necessarily considered part of the expense of the Olympics, is what you're saying.
Some of it, obviously, some is right, but once the dotted line signed and other agreements are made. But the other thing that I would say, so it's all being privately funded, they say. However, and I believe it was Mitt Romney recently was talking about how Utah will have to get federal funding and that we should actually apply for federal funding before we got confirmed because he doesn't know if the federal funding will be there if we wait. So we're also again tying strings to ourselves possibly with federal overreach. So we're
What a
not just
great
saying
idea, Jen. That seems like a great idea. Well, like we just passed a bill in the legislature about federalism, like
yeah,
keeping things separate. Then
right.
at the same time they're doing that, they're also saying like, let's reach out to the feds and get them to help fund the Olympics if it comes to Utah, because we need to get that money before there isn't any money.
Right. Well, and
Since
that's
we're only $34 trillion, maybe 35 trillion in debt as
yeah.
of today. So in 10 years, it's going to be off the charts. So because 34 trillion is not off the
Well,
charts
right.
now. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, let's
Yeah,
go
no,
get some money where there is no money. That's such a good idea.
well, right. And here's my other thing. We're talking 10 years down the line. I don't mean this, kind of rudely, but we're already, like you said, in some financial trouble as a country. Okay.
Exactly.
And we've got inflation. So,
Mhm.
what does 10 years down the line, that $2.83 billion, what does that actually end up snowballing to?
When you're
Right. So
paying
then,
interest on it constantly for
right.
10 years, well,
That's
it'll
what
be
I mean.
longer than
Like, what
10
does
years,
this
but
end up looking like? Yeah. And then my problem is Utah has a major love affair. And I understand the pros and cons to it, but they have a love affair with public private partnerships, with
oh,
these private investments or investors. But here's my concern with that. I don't think there should be private investing in these kinds of things. And I think the public has a right to know who is funding this. So is it, just some generous, well-to-do guy or
from
lady,
Utah
saying here, yeah, from Utah saying, hey,
or
I
from
really
America.
America, exactly.
I mean,
Or do
even if
we
it was
have
within our nation, it might make a difference. But yeah,
right,
who is this?
right? Like, who is this? Because no matter what, I'm sorry, and you know this, if you take money, there are strings attached. I'm
Yes.
not saying they're always horrific strings or bad strings, but there are
Right.
always
Right.
going to be strings attached. So why are we implementing something like this? Yeah, we're taking private money supposedly for this, right? That's who's going to fund it. But the people of Utah suffer or benefit, depending on how you view it, either way, from this event, right? So, whatever the consequences or benefits are, or I'm going to use Mike Levitt's quote, cascading consequences when he was talking about the Olympics. You have to live with it. Our state has to live with whatever those outcomes are. Now, whoever this, the private investor, if they're not living in Utah, do they have to suffer the consequences if there are any? So
Right.
I think the people have a right to know who is behind pushing the Olympics here, who's funding it. I think that that's very critical, and I think the people should be demanding to know that information. And I honestly think that, obviously our legislatures, et cetera, should also, I hope they at least know who it is. Somebody needs to know who it is, who's funding all of this. I mean, obviously our governor would, but I just think the legislature needs to know. There needs to be checks and balances. Does the auditor know? Is the auditor going to have access, right, to this to make sure the money's going to the right thing? And so that we're not then saying at the last minute, we went over budget by 50%. Or, I mean, heaven forbid, we're in some of those countries' cases who went over almost 200%. I mean, heaven forbid, because the taxpayers will be paying that.
Yeah, because right in the contract, it says that the taxpayers will, I believe it says that the state will guarantee any shortfalls. So anything over 4 billion, or if there's a shortfall, if we don't get enough independent funds, then we, the taxpayers, will be on the hook for it. So we kind of have to think, well, okay, I just want you to think for a second. They didn't say any overage, any shortfalls up to $2 million, $40 million, $1 trillion. Like, there's not a ceiling on that. The contract literally says any shortfalls with just no ceiling on it. So I just want to ask you, as an individual with the brain, when you give someone a blank check, say, I'll cover anything that, you send your kids off to college, and say, just put it on the credit card. Anything that you can't afford to buy, but you want, just put it on the credit card. I'll take care of it. How fiscally conservative is your college student going to be? If you give a credit card to freaking anyone and say, I'll take care of all the shortfalls without any criteria or limitations, how much is that potentially going to be? Is this this is unbelievable to me. Does this even make sense to just write a blank check saying, yeah, whatever it costs, we're fine with it. We'll see what we can get people to pay, but what we don't get from them, we'll just have the citizens, we'll just have the taxpayers pay for it. I think that's really concerning, and I think people with the ability to critically think at all can see that's super problematic. I think that's a really big problem in the contract.
Well, and to back that up, so this is again from the 2002, and it's LA Times. It's an article from LA Times who did it. But again, these are costs that don't get considered in, that you don't know about, and it's afterwards. Okay. So for example, Salt Lake had 56 million surplus, basically, is what they considered it, right? And all of that.
Jen, I want to be sure I understand that. Well, you're saying that after the Olympics was over, Salt Lake said they have 56
million overall surplus on revenues of 1.274 billion. So that's how they worded it. But the problem is, it didn't take into account the role that the taxpayer had to play in staging the game. So for example, the security costs for the Salt Lake Games were picked up by the taxpayers, which totaled more than 300 million. So think about that. If you have the 56 million surplus, but the security, which was not counted in that, right? The taxpayers picked that tab up. That's 300 million. So I just think people need to really say, we want it audited. We need line by line, every item, everything must be considered, right? Every single thing.
We need line by line. We need transparency. We need to shine light. We need to know beforehand what, because this is where the deals, you can just make things sound very different than they are.
Right. And I think most people who work with numbers know that you can almost make it go any way you want it to go, right? And so I just
So
think
true.
that there just needs to be transparency for it. Because I'm just going to bring up as an example, will that stadium that most people did not want to pay for, to be frank, most people were very expressive, and that's from both sides, Democrats, Republicans, it
Right.
doesn't matter.
Citizens,
Most
Utah
people,
citizens knew they were
the
going to
Utah
pay for it.
citizens did not agree with paying for the stadium. Okay. However, we got stuck with that bill anyway. My question is that stadium being built to be used in the 2034 Olympics? Really? Like, I'd like to see those conversations, right? What motivated that push for the stadium, and right now, like it got rammed through right now. Also, people need to start asking about those authorities. So all of these districts that are being created, right? So now you've got the state fairground authority district area. You need to start asking, are they fundamentally changing our form of government, right? Because that's what it looks like. And then another thing that I think people need to consider is Cox has been very vocal, so is Romney, about basically the entire state will be involved in these Olympics. So while it's Salt Lake City and you think, oh, it's Salt Lake's problem, not mine, I don't need to worry about it.
Right.
You might need to worry about it, right? So that's all I'm saying is I think there just needs to be very, very, like far more transparency than we've had. And there needs to be a very honest conversation with what Utah just agreed to, signed on to, and what both the pros and the cons of that are. That's all.
Okay, Jen, you said something really, it really set me off. Like it really made all my hairs on my entire body like shoot right up. Fundamentally change our form of government. And that is accurate because what you just asked it, but it's a great question. Are we willing to fundamentally change our form of government? Because when you create all these districts that have taxing authority, which is completely unconstitutional, and if you know me at all, you know my foundation is the Constitution. I'm a constitutionalist more than I'm like belong to any party or a part of any party. I'm all about the Constitution because the Constitution is what protects us and protects our freedoms and keeps the government in check. The Constitution is what secures our rights and tells the government, this is what you can do, this is what you absolutely cannot do. A republic form of government, only people that can tax have to be elected. That which means they get to be unelected and means they have to be held accountable, or they can be held accountable. They don't have to be. We should be holding them accountable. So you're saying that these entities that they have created all across the state, which they've been doing for the last several years in the legislature, the problem I have with them is that they are unelected and unaccountable. And then they're being given taxing authority. So they're literally saying, we have to tax for this, we have to tax for this. But it is taxation without representation.
100%.
We can't unelect them. We can't even see the books because they're not elected, and they're like, again, we've done a show and we'll do another one on public-private partnerships because that's a whole entity in itself. But that's where you get a big problem with private public funds being commingled, and you've got the government and you've got private entities squishing into each other and commingling and co-creating, and then the powers are being commingled. And so it does completely fundamentally change our form of government. If the founder said, Benjamin Franklin, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. And we have to know what it is. We have to get educated. We have to stand up and say, no, this is fundamentally changing our form of government. So, okay. I just had to. I agree with that.
So there's that. And then the other thing that I think people need to just ask themselves, look back to before 2002 and look back after 2002. Do you feel that Utah has improved? And in several ways it has. I would say there's several ways to argue that it has. But has it also declined in other ways, right? What does that look like? And do the pros outweigh the cons, or do the cons outweigh the pros? I think there's a lot to be looked at there, and something to just kind of highlight for people that they may or may not be aware of, is when the Olympics came, it was right after 9/11. So, of course, they heightened security, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But what happened was Utah ended up having one of the first, I think it was in the world, I'll say nation, but I think it was in the world, security communication systems implemented in our state in order to handle the Olympics, but it never went away. It's just continued, and it's built up bigger and bigger. And now, again, people can weigh these pros and cons for themselves, but it is infringing on privacy. So Fourth Amendment and other rights are being infringed upon at this juncture. So I would ask people, was it, do you consider that went in a good way or a bad way? Or should we have maybe said you can only go this far and we should have stopped it, you know what I mean, at a certain point? Like, what are those conversations like? And again, I will point out this is not a Republican or Democrat issue, because we keep getting put into this. And the reason I bring that up is many of you can go look, but Rocky Anderson, who's a Democrat, was very wise in pointing out, hey, hold on a minute. We had illegal spying, as he called it. I'm using his words, illegal spying on the communications during the Olympics, and he didn't even know about it until I think 2013. Like, he found out that Salt Lake County was basically under a surveillance dome for the Olympics. Everybody's text. So if you went in and out of Salt Lake County, your text, your email, your phone calls, all of that were going into a database. So those are just things to ask, because if you're hosting it again, and we all know how how tense things are right now in the world. Hopefully 10 years from now, it'll be far less tense. But just if we keep on this trajectory, what does that look like in 2034, right? What does that security look like? So that's just some questions for people to ponder.
Okay, that's a really, really good point, Jen. I think I really like that aspect, is looking to like, what was Utah like before 2002? A lot of times it's kind of hard to remember, and because we just kind of get used to how it is. But I want to be kind of specific, if you don't mind giving us some specific ideas. Before 2002, we really didn't have surveillance. We never had that system. And we know that that system was also used during COVID, where they were tracking people that came into the state, tracking, so they knew people that came over, and they knew, they know who's vaccinated. They don't know if we have a database. We've really fought having a specific database on that, but they do have a database on everyone that was vaccinated, which if you have a database on everyone that was vaccinated, then you naturally have a database on everyone who wasn't. Because if they're not on the database to be vaxxed, then they are on the one not being vaxxed. So there is that tracking. So so you're saying that system, the tracking system, which a lot of people would consider extremely reasonable. You're bringing people here from all over the world. You need to know who's here. If there was some kind of an event, you want to know who's doing it. You want to be able to track those people. And of course, the FBI and the CIA want to track who is here, and if there's terrorists that are coming, we want to know about that. So you can definitely say that's all reasonable and it was necessary. What you're saying is that stayed. We didn't get rid of that system, and that has been corroborated with Rocky Anderson, which I do remember. He made a big deal of that, and unfortunately, I think, I'm just making this up, I don't know if it was because he's a Democrat, but it doesn't seem like, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there, I don't know that things really got handled. He made a deal of it, he brought it up, but I don't believe that anything ever got fixed.
He had a lawsuit, and the last I knew, it still hadn't been addressed.
Okay.
But the lawsuit was there, and he'd been fighting it, like I said, since 2013, and then 2017, I know, was kind of the last I saw, any big articles about it, right?
Yeah, because I really haven't heard anything, but the last I did hear, it had not been resolved. So I'm not sure anything's happened there, but it's definitely worth checking into. But in that time frame, though, what we do know, bringing up what you just said, so the NSA came in. We do know that.
Yep.
That happened after 2002. And that was always really interesting to me, why we would want the NSA to be here in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
is clearly tracking our every movement. It's gathering our info, our data, all, cell phones, computers, all that. So, and that is here in the state of Utah.
Right.
Are there any other specific things that you can think of? I'm trying to think of ways that our
Yeah.
state has changed. And
Yeah.
that's
I
one,
would
which I would
say,
not consider a positive change. I consider that
sure. Yeah.
a horrible change.
The other is global reach. So the goal, which they had, kind of said, and I understand it again, pros and cons to everything. They kind of felt like Utah before the Olympics was a little bit, your cousin, your redheaded cousin over there, kind of, well, they're weird and just hanging out, in their
Uh-huh.
cowboy boots and
Kind of
whatever.
unknown
Right?
and Hicks. Yeah,
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
Hicks. And
Yeah.
not really on the map.
Right. And
They wanted to bring the Olympics here to put Utah on the map. They did. We're
correct.
on
And
the
they
map.
wanted, yes, and they wanted to bring innovation, right? And the tech sector and all of these things to Utah. And I would say, for better or worse, again, depending on whose opinion it is, they were successful. Utah is on the map. It is a tech center, a tech hub. And
Oh,
Utah
yes,
is
that's a good
very,
point. So are you linking that? You're saying that this becoming a tech hub and a Silicon Valley of Utah
Mhm.
are you linking that to the Olympics coming to Utah?
I think it was the introduction, right? It was
Mhm.
like that's where they started to have some of those conversations. It was a way to, again, showcase Utah, showcase what Utah's capable of. And again, I think everybody that lives here, grew up here, knows Utah has a very strong work ethic, right? Utah has
Yes,
a very dedicated and a lot of good people who want to do good
yes.
things, and so I think
Trustworthy,
right,
good, honorable
trustworthy,
people.
good.
Plus, we're real well educated. We really value
Yes.
education here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%. And so I think it was like, look, we have a great workforce. They're not getting these quality jobs, so they have to move out of state to get quality jobs, and we want them brought here, right? So again, there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
Okay, there's pros and cons, but again, I think looking back, because we've been down this road now, so we have the luxury of going, okay, what did we successfully do? What did we not successfully do? And where did we maybe need to put some guardrails on that we didn't think about? Right. And so I
Excellent.
think
Mhm.
that's another outcome from the Olympics that people can decide, again, better or worse, that has altered the Utah we knew before. Right. So I'm going to, for example, obviously inflation, all of that affects the housing costs. But when you have a lot of people moving somewhere to get tech jobs or other things like that,
Mhm.
those housing costs they just keep ballooning, right? Like California. So, and again, you also have policies being put in and influenced. And again, I'm not saying that in a negative way, but pro and con from those companies that are coming in, right? These tech companies
Mhm.
and we, like I said, do have a problem in Utah with public-private partnerships. We do. You can't. There is a problem, and
There's a
so
very serious problem with public-private
very serious
partnerships
problem.
because
And so what?
we have very few
Yeah.
legislators cannot see the problems with that, and they embrace it. And
Mm-hmm.
they are unconstitutional.
Mm-hmm.
They are. There's no
Right.
way around it. They are. It's not a
Right.
matter of
And
opinion. Like a
so
lot of things are, I see where you're coming from. I see how you see it, but public-private partnerships are completely unconstitutional because they violate the republic.
right, right. And so I think there just needs to be we basically opened the gates probably way too big, right? And we're like, everybody come in and we're doing business with everybody. And then you also have to keep in mind the World Trade Center Utah was brought in after the Olympics as well. And that meeting to discuss it was happening during that time at the Olympics, right? So there was a lot of
Really?
there was a lot of global meetings, global
Mhm.
conversations happening, which makes sense, right? You're
Which
all
makes
meeting.
sense. Of
It's
course,
not,
there would
again,
be. Yeah.
yeah, it's again not a bad or a good, but you're having those meetings because now you
Mhm.
can show them your state. You can say, look, I've
Yes.
been telling you, but come here and look, see how awesome. So all of that starts to happen. And so again, I would just ask, what has been the benefit or the cons, again, pros, cons to all of this? And I think people need to really, including our legislature, need to really kind of write that down, maybe physically write it down for themselves and say, okay, we've improved this way, but we've also declined this way. So how do we prevent that from happening this next time?
Yeah. Oh, that is the best question. I have one more question, but I think that is a huge question. Like, how do we make this better? And how do we prevent the mistakes that we made last time, but also prevent new mistakes, because it's a new world and things are much, much more invasive and much easier to be invasive than they were back in 2002. I just have a couple of points before we move on here. I just had a couple of points that I think are really important. One of the other parts of the contract, because I haven't seen all of it, but I know one of the other parts of this contract, one is that the taxpayers will be on the hook for anything that they go over. We will guarantee any shortfalls. But another one was stating that we would do everything in our power as a state, a city and a state that's hosting the Olympics, try to get the UN and the Olympic Bid Committee, or the Olympic Committee, maybe not the Bid Committee, the Olympic Committee, and the United States to stop their investigation of the China swimmers who are being accused of doing drugs and competing and then winning. And there's an investigation. And so part of bringing the Olympics here from the Olympic Bid Committee was that in the contract was that we will not continue that investigation. We will do everything in our power to stop that investigation.
Yes.
Now, I am a person who I think that integrity is a lot more important than money. And I think my life pretty much shows that. So I give up a lot of money for integrity. And so I feel it. I understand the enticement. I do understand. Oh, we just have to look the other way and let's just stop this. It's got, it's, it's kind of past. Let's move forward. I understand the enticement. So I'm not really trying to shoot arrows at anybody or judge anyone, but I would like to be on the record of stating I'm so 100% against that. I think, what is the Olympics? If it's the games are tainted, what does it mean to win?
Well, that's exactly it.
If there's no integrity in them, then what are they?
100%. That's exactly it. What are they if we're not being honest and people aren't really winning by, their own accord? And why would that even be a stipulation that Utah would even entertain or agree to? That's something that I would like answered by those who signed it. Why would you ever even enter into that agreement?
And I think it's important to note also that every other country outside of two countries, and I can't remember, I had it in my brain, but I can't remember. There were two countries that stayed in. Every other country pulled out of even bidding because they're like, that was a deal breaker. They're like, no, we're not going to sacrifice our integrity or the integrities of the game. So we're not even going to bid. There were only two other countries and Salt Lake City, Utah, that remained in the bidding because of that part of the contract.
Yeah, I think it was Beijing, and I think the other one was Kazakhstan.
One was China for sure.
Kazakhstan.
That's exactly it. Kazakhstan and China. Yes, good job. Yeah. Yes, those are the only. So that tells you a lot. Of course, China. Well, they're all in on that. They're like, yeah, that's what we want. And Kazakhstan, which I don't know that much about, but apparently that's not a big deal to them. Yes, they just want to be on the map. So.
Well, and also to be clear, Boston even backed out as a city in the U.S. Boston was like, no, we're good.
Yes, even Boston said, no, that's a deal breaker for us. And so I think that really that brings up a lot of red flags for me. That very much concerns me. It's like we're supposed to be this light of honor and integrity and enlightenment here in Utah. We're all about integrity. And then we're willing to, except for, having cheaters play in the Olympics and giving, and I'm not, and please do not hear that I'm saying they're guilty, because I'm not, I don't know, but it's an investigation. You do an investigation to either find them guilty or exonerate them. And so I'm all for the investigation happening so that we will, if they are not cheating, why would they want to have that hanging over their head and everyone wondering? I would want an investigation done so that I can be exonerated and showed, and then there's no clouds following, and there's nobody questioning. So I feel like the investigation absolutely needs to happen, and I find that very disturbing. Another
Yeah.
thing that I think is really important is that Sochi and Rio de Janeiro, they both they had their budget and they spent 4 times what was budgeted. So that kind of gives you a pretty good idea
Mhm.
of where we are on that. And again, Utah only went 24% over budget. I don't know that that could happen again. But just to give you a broader perspective, and no Olympics in the last 40 years has stayed within budget, and that is according to the Oxford study. So that's
Mhm.
not my, or just a random,
Mhm.
it's not random. It's
Mhm.
Oxford study showing in the last 40 years, no one has been able to stay inside their budget. So I think that we need to be very realistic about the budget.
Yep.
Um, yeah,
Well, and
those.
also, what climate stuff did we sign on for? What?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because it
Uh-huh.
also, again, that can have long-lasting effects on Utah. What did we say we would change or agree to or adhere to? I would love to see that part of the contract. I haven't yet. I just want to know, because I know what the others have had to sign on to, and it's basically the Paris, the Paris
The
Agreement.
parent climate accord. And that is a very good point, Jen. That's extremely important because, in Utah, we have some issues with our clean air in the winter
Mm-hmm.
specifically that have nothing to do with anything with our own actions. It's just a natural phenomenon with the geographical structure of the Salt Lake Valley, that if there, even when no one lived here and there was no industry here, we had the inversions. That's not something we can do anything about. So it might be not wise if we care about our clean air, which I think all of us do. I mean, I think we're all
Sure.
kind of addicted to breathing. I don't think I'm the only one there. I think
No.
most of us really like breathing. It's kind of a big deal. I actually don't have problems with breathing. The inversion never affects me. I
Right.
don't have any of those kinds of problems, but I feel for people who do. Plus, I really think having clean air is a really nice thing. And
Yes.
I also think having business and industry is great too. But I think
Mm-hmm.
we have so much ingenuity and we have technology able to do more. And
Mm-hmm.
and we I just want to give credit where credit is due. We have made amazing progress. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying we're done, but we've made amazing progress. Our air is so much cleaner than it was when I was a child, when I was growing
Mm-hmm.
up in the
Yep.
Bountiful in the state of Utah. It's so much better. And not saying we're done, but we have done a lot. But the
Yep.
climate agreements are so anti-American. They're
Mm-hmm.
so anti the future.
Mm-hmm.
They are so anti-business and anti-people. They're
Mm-hmm.
very anti-people.
Very.
They're they're so unrealistic. And
Mm-hmm.
as many people have stated, um, many of our own speaker, Senator Mike Lee, many of our leaders have stated these things that they have, the mandates that they have are so unrealistic that even if no one lived in the state of Utah, we wouldn't meet them. So
Right.
that's ridiculous. That's totally
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. We can't work for a goal that is unattainable. Why
Right.
bother? So, okay. And then you asked a great question, and I want to just ask it again. Do you remember what it was?
I don't. Which thing? What were we talking about?
Well, I know it's
It might have been that you just need to ask what the outcome, like for
yes.
Utah, if we sign on to these things, what does that look like for Utah? Because we'll be stuck with them permanently. I don't know if that was it or not.
That's exactly it. Yes. Let's ask ourselves, like,
Mm-hmm.
let's measure between the cons and the pros. Let's
Mm-hmm.
measure that. Let's look at it and see if we really, if it's going to, the benefit outweighs the negative. And then I do think making a list of things that we can do, like, are we willing? What are we willing to not cross the line on? We're already obviously willing to cross the line on allowing China to allow, asking the Olympic Committee and the United States to stop the investigation on the Chinese swimmers. That's an unpalatable line that we have crossed already. But I think we need to ask that of all the other things that we have discussed. And the other one that you brought up earlier on another podcast was, what good does the Olympic do for the citizens of Utah? We know what it does for business, and businesses are citizens that work for them and own them. But what does it do for the general populace? What does it, we know for a select group of businesses, it benefits, but what does it benefit all of the citizens in the state as a whole? That is your question that you asked also at another time that I thought was a phenomenal question that we should always be asking. How does this benefit the every citizen in the state, and make sure that it does benefit everyone more than it disadvantages us, and make sure the wealth transfer is not just to the wealthy, and that we don't have a wealth transfer, that we literally make this a great opportunity for every citizen in the state of Utah. So, okay. Jen, thank you so much. That is just absolutely fabulous information. And I really want to thank you so much for the great research you have done on this. And I also want to, I would love to have your take on this. I want to just kind of switch over to the current Olympics that are happening right now in France. And I really don't know how much you have participated or what you know, but I know that you're very smart and you're not living in a cave. So I know you know some of this, but I think we all know, with very few exceptions, although I did just talk to one of my tenants 2 days ago, and they had no idea this happened. I was like, oh, really? That's amazing. So I'm like, lucky you. So I think most people in the state of Utah and across America, and really across the world, are aware of the opening ceremonies in France, where they depicted the Last Supper in a manner of fraud. And it was portraying the apostles as transgender people. And it was very offensive and very derogatory to
Christians.
Well, I think it was derogatory to Christians, but what I do know, it was very derogatory to Christ. I feel like it was designed. Well, no, it's not my feelings. At first they came out and said, oh, no, it wasn't meant to depict the Last Supper. Now they admit it absolutely was admitted to depict the Last Supper. Now, we are always told that the Olympics is like this amazing sports opportunity that brings the world together. It's not political. It's all sports. And it's a really great opportunity for us to kind of put down those guards, even with our enemy countries, and to come together as a world and celebrate the different nations, our differences, and to come together in sports and be able to really honor and support different athletes who are just amazing. Like, their accomplishments, incredible. They are just, it is so fun to watch the things that people can do, that they can train themselves and do, and the courage and the commitment level is just amazing. And I do love that part of the Olympics. And so this opening ceremony is supposed to be kind of a culmination of bringing us all together. And that's the mission, right? That's supposed to be the mission. This was clearly meant to make a very political statement. And there were no guards whatsoever. There was no decorum. There was no level of decency or honor. It was designed to be offensive. Now, I personally, as a Christian, as a very active, devout Christian, who my Christian faith means more to me than anything. My family means everything to me. The reason my family means everything to me is because of my Christian faith, my belief in Christ as my Lord and Savior. I'm choosing not to be offended because I do not want to give them that kind of power over me or my feelings or my decisions. But it was designed to be offensive. And I will say it was an offensive event, but I choose not to be offended by it because I'm not giving them that kind of power. Sure. But, and then we ask, so how do they get away with this? Like, what other faiths could they do this to that they would get away with it? Because I would say they pretty much got away with it. Would you disagree with me?
No, they got away with it. I
It
mean,
got
it
called
went
out.
through. It went live.
Did it? It
Yeah,
got called
I
out.
mean,
There's been
yeah,
no apology, which I wouldn't. I'm not asking for an apology because they meant it, and an apology would not be sincere. So
well, and they gave one, but it wasn't like a real
it
apology.
wasn't a real.
It was
When
not a real, yeah.
you talk to someone into an apology, it's not really an
Yeah,
apology.
it was. Yeah,
It's words,
it said they lost some sponsors, and the backlash has been intense. So that's
right?
yeah. Um, I watched it. I saw it. So and as a person who is spiritual but not religious, even I was able to pick up what they were putting down. Right. So
Right.
I don't think we need to the Greek thing, even if it was the Greek, stuff, it's still not a great message for the
Right.
Olympics.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Olympics to me, if you were really doing a wonderful opening ceremony, and I'm going to be frank, I haven't liked a lot of the opening ceremonies, pieces of them, sure, but
Yes. Agreed.
I think you should be highlighting the athletics, right? The sportsmanship, the athletics, the kind of we're all laying down our swords for a minute to come together for this one event, and we're not going to be antagonizing one another or mistreating one another. We're going to
Right.
come together for
We're
that.
coming
I really
together. We're
think,
putting down our swords. That's such a great
right.
way to put it, Jen.
Yeah, so I just think that that's something that should be highlighted, and that's really what I would focus on. And I think it could have been, a great opening ceremony had that been the focus. It wasn't. But the other thing that I would also highlight with Paris that Utah and others need to be paying attention to, like LA, etc., is that the athletes are complaining about their situations, and many are moving out of the Olympic Village and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're an athlete, you know this. You have a strict regiment, like your diet regiment.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
they cannot access meat and eggs over there at the level that is necessary for all of these athletes. So these athletes are not able to get the food, just we're talking basic here, food
Right.
that they need. And I don't know if people know, but some of the beds are made of like cardboard type of situation, and then you've got no AC, which I know we're American, we're snotty with our AC, but it's not just us complaining, right? It's other countries saying, hey, hold on, because it's so hot, etc. So I just want to say, I
But
think,
food, Jen,
yeah,
food. And
food,
when you're hosting the Olympics, food is a big deal.
it's
Not just for
huge.
the people coming to see the Olympics, but athletes they
Right.
have a very special. I don't know an athlete who doesn't have a special diet, very
Right.
highly regiment, because they need that for their energy, their strength, their power.
Mm-hmm.
It's just essential.
Right. Well, that's exactly. So again, that goes back to the agreements that we're talking about. We need to really look at what Utah has agreed to there, because I don't think that you want to be a host and having to, which is what Paris is having to do now, panic and try to run around and find meat and eggs because you've agreed to some weird, agenda item
Yeah, well, I
to
think
match
Utah
this.
should be fine with that, except for the climate agreements where they're trying to get rid of
Right.
all of our cows, because otherwise I
Right,
think we'd
that's
be
what I
perfectly
mean. So,
fine.
like, what? So I just think, if you're going to continue hosting Olympics and things, and I do think that actually needs to be a conversation. The reason I think that is I don't know if the public is aware, but the IOC has decided that they might have a permanent rotation set,
Yes.
and Utah's trying to get on that permanent rotation set, which again, the cost of that to be permanently on that is crazy to me. But I
And not
do
be able
think,
to make that decision based on where you are and what you want. And I mean,
right,
yeah, no,
right.
I think a lot of people are aware of that.
Yeah. And so I just think, these are things that we need to kind of be paying attention to in Paris, because in my opinion, Paris is where we've really, don't get me wrong, Rio and some of these others were obviously kind of limping up to this, where it was like, we got problems going on. Because Rio barely got done at the nick of time, right? I mean, to
Right.
open up. So I just think we need to take a serious look and say, okay, can the world even afford what is demanded right, of hosting these things? Or have we gotten a little out of control? And just bring it back to the basics. It's athletic and supposed to be world coming together. Like, what else do we need? Please bring it back to like a rational, you know what I mean, level that people can host it and not go into bankruptcy over it, things like that. I just think we need to have a realistic conversation about the Olympics and what all of it is and what it's supposed to be and what it's turned into.
Oh, so well said, because it's just getting so out of control, just kind of like our national budget and spending. And, I thought, with going to France, like France has so much beauty, natural beauty, and so much art that they could definitely focus on, like a lot of times an opening ceremony will focus on the country or the city and focus on the highlights there, like, welcome to our city, welcome to our country.
Mm-hmm.
This is who we are. This is what it's a welcome. It's laying out a welcome mat.
Yeah.
And like, we're so happy to have all you athletes come here. But France could have highlighted the beauty of France and the art of France, which is just incredible. And they have the Louvre, like they have so much people go from all over the world to see the art of France, and they couldn't highlight that. They do some literally fraud, really disgusting. Just, it was repulsive. And
it was
and I appreciate what you said. Yeah, we need to get back to the basics. Let's go back to what it's about. And it just kind of shows what everything's getting to be really quite political. They're just adding it into everything. Okay, I want to just make a really quick statement. I really appreciate what you said, because I'm like, what do we want to do? I feel like as a Christian, Christians, Christ taught to turn the other cheek. And we as Christians are pretty, not always, we're very flawed and we don't always do that, but we appreciate that is what Christ said. But he also condemned evil. He also called out the Sadducees and Pharisees. He did not pretend like they were friends. He did not go, oh yeah, that's fine. He didn't agree with what he didn't agree with. He didn't agree with evil. He didn't unify with evil. He spoke the truth. He shed light on darkness. And so, yes, he turned the other cheek, and he taught to turn the other cheek, but he also said to stand up and speak the truth. So I love what you said. We need to stand up and have a conversation. We need to say, we're not going to participate if this is the kind of stuff. We want to get back to the basics. We don't want it to cost this huge amounts of money. We want to not compete in that way. We want to just highlight the athletes. We want to highlight our cities where we're going to go and highlight the accomplishments of the athletes, even if they don't get gold or silver or bronze. Like the fact that they're there, oh my goodness, there's so much to acknowledge, and there's so much to highlight just there for their great accomplishments and what they've done. Just getting to the Olympics is quite an amazing, just amazing in itself, quite an amazing accomplishment.
Yes.
So, but I do feel like without hate, without self-righteousness, without retribution, we do need to hold them accountable. And I do think we shouldn't just let this go. I do think that we should hold them accountable and hold their feet to the fire. Now, speaking again of the current Olympics, I'm sure that you heard, and I could be wrong because we didn't discuss this before, but speaking of Olympic athletes, now one of my issues that I have been spending a great amount of time, like so much time the last 4 years, is on transgender athletes. I've also spent a lot of time on protecting children against transgenderism as under 18. I'm not I mean, full disclosure, I don't think it's a good idea for anybody, because what's true here, let's just state the truth. No one can change their sex. No amount of steroids, hormones, no amount of surgery will ever change your sex. It can change your presentation, and it certainly changes your body, but it doesn't change your sex. And I don't think it's wise. And we've always known from many years, since we started having psychologists and psychiatrists, gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And I feel it's real. And I feel for people with that. I have nothing but compassion for someone who's suffering from gender dysphoria, and there are solutions. There are ways to heal that, which is so wonderful. When people get healed, oh, that is truly freedom. That is
Right.
free. And not to suggest we don't all have ways we need to be freed, and we have our own mental illness or our own issues. But in the Olympics, I quit really participating as far as watching the Olympics when they changed their bylaws to say that transgendered men can. I suppose they changed it both ways, but it's not really an issue. That
compete in sports.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
That they can compete in sports against women.
Yes,
that they can compete in
transgender
sports
people
against
of both
women.
sports can compete in, and they have a standard. Like you have to qualify. So you have to qualify. So it's not any transgender boy can compete on girl sports. They have to qualify, but they've allowed qualifications that a biological man can compete in girl sports and in the women's sports. And one of these is in boxing. And I just like, they're allowing a biological man to box in the women's.
Here's the thing. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Sorry, cut out from it. Here's what I was going to say. I think to me, and I saw this posted somewhere, and I thought it was I thought it made sense. But at what point are we going to address that this is anti-women?
Yes.
It is woman faith. It is unacceptable. Period. End of discussion. No more. That's it. This is anti-women.
It is anti-women.
Women. Yes.
And really, you know what it is? It's totally anti-women in every way. It's also anti-God. It is anti-religion. It's anti-God, because you're saying to God, you're saying to people, we can do what God can't do. We know more, and we're not going to go by God's law, the laws of nature, and nature's God. We are the God. And so it is so anti-women, and it's like, oh yeah, any biological man who meets our standards can now compete against women. And this woman, and I am sorry because I should have written it down. I don't remember what nation she was from, but
Italy.
It was Italy. Thank you. Mm-hmm. She's being boxed by a man, and she's used to being hit in the face.
Yeah.
She's absolutely used to it. In fact, Clarissa Shields, who was a 2-time gold medal winner in boxing, and she came out, she spoke out. I'm very impressed, very proud of her, and said men should compete against men, women should compete against women, and obviously trans people should be able to compete. Trans should compete against trans, but you don't see women, biological women, competing on men's sports. You just don't see it. There's a good reason for it. Maybe in chess or something like that, but you don't see it in sports. But she said she's even competed in order to train. She's even been in the ring with men, but it's not even unheard of. But this woman, this amazing boxer from Italy, said she had to quit. Can you imagine? Yes. I mean, she literally thought she was going to die, that her brains were going to be beat out.
She said she'd never been hit so hard in her life.
She's never been hit so hard to a degree that she thought it was going to either give her brain damage or kill her. And so, I just want you to imagine how she has worked for so many years to get to this point, and then to be in the ring and just say, wow, it was so bad. And this is a woman who's used to pain, who's used to being hit, and it was so bad. And it is just basically we're saying, yeah, women aren't really relevant. There is no such thing as a woman. It doesn't even matter. And so, and also another point that I think is really important here is, as people watch the Olympics and they watch a biological man hitting a woman, what does that do to our culture? What does it do to the psyche of both men and women to make it a sport for men to hit women and for the world to watch and say this is acceptable? How does that impact domestic violence? And I don't want to go like trying to go off the rails here, but when everyone in the world watches a biological man beating up a woman, and I
Yep.
know the woman got in the ring of her own free will and choice, and I think that's an important distinction. But women who are beaten and abused are often accused of that. You stayed married to him, you stayed in the relationship. But when our culture and what happens to the male psyche and the female psyche to watch a man beat up a woman, and then the world applauds it and accepts it, I'm very concerned about the message that is sent and what happens to men who are aggressive and naturally stronger than women when the world applauds it, and to a woman who sees the world applaud, it's acceptable, it's okay. Will this increase domestic violence and in both men doing it and women accepting it and thinking, well, this is our part of our culture? I'm very concerned about that, how that affects men, women, and children as they grow up. Watching people across the world are watching this happen and watching.
Well, right. It's disgusting. Again, what happened? And I'm going to use their words. What happened to women's spaces?
Yes.
What happened to them?
Yeah.
The women don't have spaces anymore.
No.
Ours are allowed to be completely infiltrated because we're supposed to accommodate biological males who, for better or for worse, again, there's, people who genuinely have dysphoria, who are wanting to be women or transitioning into women, etc. My thing is, why does at least 50% of the population have to accommodate that nonsense?
Absolutely. Why should 50% of the population accommodate a percentage of people who have a problem with their feelings, who are struggling with a mental illness, and yet 50% of the population's rights are completely stripped of them?
Yep.
They are completely undermined and have no rights. And Riley Gaines, a personal hero. I'm not much of a person worshiper, but I'm so impressed with her. I think she is so amazing. She's just young, but she has dealt with this, and she's told how swimming, all of a sudden, you're used to not having any privacy. You're used to not having, really any modesty, and that you're used to just changing into your swimming suit in and out, in between meets. But you are used to having only women be in your locker room. And then all of a sudden, with no warning, there is a full-on man with all the parts, full-on body, the genitalia hanging out. They're naked, and they turn around, and there's this man fully naked, all intact. And there they are in their private space. And as a woman, you and I will tell the world, women are different than men. We are vulnerable. When we're in a woman's bathroom or a locker room, it's our most vulnerable place. We go in the bathroom, we are partially undressed. We're very vulnerable there, and we don't want men in there. And I know some men, I know my husband's not one of them. I doubt yours is, but I know men that I really like, that I have respect for. They just think it's hilarious. They're just like, oh, they couldn't care less if a woman goes in the men's bathroom. They think that's funny. They're like, oh, a woman can come in here. They do not understand. And, because men aren't so, they aren't quite as.
They're not quite as vulnerable to women.
They're not.
Right?
They're not vulnerable to women. That's my point. They're not at all vulnerable to women. How does a woman rape a man? Good luck. They're not.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, exactly. You'd have to have a weapon, right? It'd have to be something like that. But it is far different strength-wise. We can all just admit that there's a different strength level, right, between men and women. So
huge,
and my
even
husband,
a very strong woman, she can have a weapon, but men do not feel the vulnerability of what they just don't have that vulnerability.
Yeah, not in the same way.
They're just different. They're built different. Their DNA is different. And I know that's a generalization. There might be some men who do feel vulnerable, but it's not a male vulnerability. Men do not feel vulnerable to women like women feel vulnerable to men.
Yep.
And so when a woman goes in the bathroom, they need their privacy. We don't want to feel more vulnerable. We want to be private. And And men don't necessarily, and some men do and some men don't, understand how vulnerable a woman is in the bathroom. But it is a very serious issue, and you've absolutely nailed it. The design is to erase women. It is to erase
Yep.
women, to make us not not much of a difference, and to just say there isn't. And we have noticed in Planned Parenthood's presentations that they make for the maturation programs for, I believe it's fifth grade, but it might be sixth grade in elementary schools. Their maturation programs that continually make there is no difference between boys and girls. They've been trying to raise a generation of children who don't see boys and girls as different from each other, so that this could be very easy. They're fluid. You can go back and forth between boys and girls. You can be non-binary. So you can be a non-gendered person. And so we do see this elimination of women, and it's been happening even by women. And that is the thing that I find surprising.
Well,
it's happening by
women
women.
have been the biggest pusher of it.
They have, haven't they?
But they have, and that is atrocious to me.
Yes.
But again, it points to the power of media, unfortunately,
Yes.
and its ability to sway rational thought, rational foundational things that at one time we all agreed on. At one time, we all agreed
not long ago.
A man, a woman's a woman, right? Then now, it's like living in crazy world.
It is living in crazy world, and it has interestingly become partisan, which is so crazy to me. That we have a person running for president who they can't define, for a party who can't define what a woman is, but the current person in the White House, Biden, said he's going to choose someone who is Black and who is a woman, even though they can't define what a woman is, that was a criteria for becoming the vice president. Now that person is running to be president for a party who can't define what a woman is, but then many of the people in the party are saying we want to vote for her because she is a woman, even though they can't define what a woman is, which I find is crazy land. It is very interesting.
I mean, it's a wild time. And I would certainly hope that Utah would say, don't think about doing this here, Olympics. Don't even consider allowing men to beat up a woman on the world stage. We're not going to do that. Thank you.
Jen, thank you. That is a really good point, and that needs to be in our document. So which if we're going to sign on, it should absolutely be saying we're not going to allow any biological male competing on any women's sports at all. Period. None. Yep. No, there is no criteria. The criteria is no biological man is playing on any women's sports. That should be something that's happening in Utah. I don't see how we can tell the IOC what the rules are. I don't think we have that kind of power just because we're hosting it. And that in itself should be a reason not to host it.
100%. Here's the thing that I think we as Utahns have to start, again, getting back to or discussing. Yeah, okay, so again, they say, hey, it'll bring in business, and it does. Like you said, it does. It helps. Yeah. But folks, we have to start working on getting Utah back operational in full scale, meaning where we actually do have our own businesses, people, right, working and making Utah, I don't know, better, right, and improving Utah the way that Utahns want to see it go, not the way that global entities or organizations or federal government wants to see it go, right? How does Utah want to grow and evolve? What things do we want to focus on, right? Like those kinds of things. That needs to be really where that comes in, because who is the biggest employer in this country? It's the government. Is that not a terrifying, really? I want people to step back and think about that. The biggest employer, which was not the case, this back in the day, America had lots of different mom and pop shops, local, right? All of these things.
Entrepreneurship was what built America. 80% of businesses employees were in small businesses.
Right.
That entrepreneurship was what built America. It was the theme of America. And now 50% are government employed.
Right. And so here's the thing. You talk about like, what happens if the people ever have to say no more to the government? You're not going to, because they own you in every sense of the word. Mm-hmm. Can you grow your own food? I bet you can't. You know what I mean? Do you even know how, do you even have the basic, right, know-how to do it? Right. Most people don't, so I think there needs to be a genuine effort in Utah. I won't speak for the rest of the country, but I live in Utah. So in Utah, of where we start getting back to, we need to know how to grow our own food. I mean, what happens if there's an EMP attack? It's not even about if your government, right? Like, what if you can't access it for some reason? How do you grow your own food?
What if there's no gas and you can't access gas and the trucks can't bring food in?
Right.
Like, this is real.
Right. And they talk about education. Well, that's education to me. Like serious, legit education. Teach people how to manufacture, make their own goods. Because you know what small business owners do? They build the middle class out. And then you've got property ownership, which is key, by the way. And we're losing it in Utah, losing it. So you have property ownership. People can self-sustain. They don't need handouts from the government. They can self-sustain, and the family unit needs to be protected. Utah used to be very family-focused. I would argue that's not really the case anymore. So I think it needs to get back to that because, again, family is critically important, right? The mother's role is critically important. Women are critically important. So are men. The father's role is critically important. Those things need to come back together, and we need to be self-sustainable.
That is exactly right. Because we used to want to have jobs that we would create entrepreneurial opportunities or jobs that where our children could get and have jobs in Utah, where they could have the American dream, own a home and have a job here and have a family here and be family oriented. And the women, we very much were a state at one time where the women were at home raising their families. And now we have one of the lowest percentages of women that are at home. We have one of the highest percentages of mothers that work outside of the home that are employed.
Right, and it's because you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, or at bare minimum, just trying to keep a roof over your head.
Yes,
because
everything some really have no choice because of our expenses and inflation, but some just want to have a nicer car and a nicer house and keep up with the Joneses and make sure all the kids have everything, and yet they don't have the most important thing, and that's their mom in the home.
Right.
There isn't a compensation for that. There isn't a compensation. And, as an older woman, I just want to say, like, when I was having my kids, you think, once you have kids, you always have kids, which is true. My dad would always say that. Oh, once you have kids, you always have kids. You never not, which is very true. But you only have them in your home for a very short amount of time. And then you're still young. When you're kids, you're an empty nester. I always thought empty nesters were old people. But now that I'm there, I'm like, no, you're still young and you still have decades ahead of you that you can go back in the workforce or that you can start your own business or do all kinds of things. You still have lots of time. Your time to raise your family is so short. Raise your kids, be there for them, do that while you can, because the days are so numbered. They're gone before you know it, and you just miss them. I just miss my kids so much. I'd give anything to go back to when my kids were at home. It was a magical time. It's so much fun. I just loved it. Yeah. So that's great advice, Jen. And that's where Utah should be at the forefront of the nation of moms and dads raising their kids. And we should have jobs that our kids can and want to do and stay in the state to do. We should be supporting.
Well, right. And even family businesses, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Family businesses too. Again, and we're losing all of that. So
because we're bringing businesses in, global businesses in from not only other states, but other countries, changing our culture, changing our dynamics, causing the inflation, causing us to not be able to, for our kids to not be able to afford to buy a house.
Yeah.
And so then they have to leave.
Yep. Yep, that's exactly it. They can't, and we keep saying we want our kids to stay here, and they keep saying they're going to build affordable houses. I'm going to be really frank here. I don't know who can afford, and you're calling affordable 300,000 plus with property taxes going through the roof.
Yes.
That's not affordable. And that also, again, cuts down on family because people aren't going to be having children if they can't even freaking afford a place to live.
So true.
So, yeah.
I have 6 children. 2 have homes. They're very modest homes, but they're very grateful that they have their homes. 4 children trying to buy homes. They've been saving up for quite a while. They were, like really close. And then the market and the inflation, well, then Biden got elected supposedly or got in office. And it was a game changer. And so they're trying so hard to be in a position where they can just get into a house. And it's very, very difficult. And so it's just totally true. And I think several of my children have said to me, they said, Mom, a lot of your friends, they don't really get the seriousness of the situation because they're financially set. Their houses are paid off. They've got their retirement set. They're in a good place. They're set, but they don't understand that what they're leaving to their children and what, like for us that are trying to buy houses, they're not really understanding what is happening and how it is affecting the future and the future generations. And so I would ask everyone to consider that, especially as you not just vote, but as you support people that are running and as you vet them and consider who to elect. You're not going to find any perfect candidates. You're just not, because Jesus Christ isn't on the ballot. So you're not going to have any candidates that are perfect. But look for someone whose goal is to protect our freedoms, to ensure we have more freedom, not to control us and take over and want to rule us. And the contrasts are very stark. They're not difficult. They're very, very stark. But you're going to have to do a little research. But we will be discussing that on another show. We're going to be sharing the difference between the 2 presidential candidates and other candidates so that you can easily get educated and look at their records and look at who they really are and what they really believe based on their fruits, based on their actions, not based on what they say now, but based on what they have produced. And so, and you brought up a really good point, Jen. I just want to reemphasize what you're saying about a garden, about being self-sufficient and a garden. This is a great time to learn how to grow a garden. And if you don't even have a plot or a place in your yard, you can do a planter garden. I did a planter garden last year, and I did the year before, and it wasn't very successful. And because it's like you say, you have to learn how to do a planter garden. It's very different than growing a regular garden. But I had a very successful planter garden last year. And so you can, even without a lot of space, without a lot of resources. My problem is I have lots of space. I have 3/4 of an acre, but I have a lot of deer that live in my yard, and they just eat everything. They don't share at all. They're not like pigs where they only eat half. They're hogs. They eat everything. And so I have to have my garden on a place where it's fenced and the deer can't get to it. And so even there, I could grow a very successful garden and have great vegetables and great produce. So that is great advice for everyone. Because really, Jen, what you're saying is we are the guardians of our own liberty, and we need to step up and do that.
Yep.
So I would ask everyone to at least contact your House of Representative and your senator and let them know, ask them these questions, give them these questions, get them thinking about some of the ramifications of the Olympics, which are the same ramifications of having spending a lot of money on, different structures like the baseball and the hockey stadium. But definitely talk to them about the Olympics and not that you're against it, not that I'm against it, but we need to really think through and talk about the consequences and costs. You've given us much to think about, Jen. Any last minute parting thoughts on that?
Not much. I think you wrapped it up really nicely. I think there just needs to be some communication, and I think for one other thing I would suggest, and it is actually something that does happen in many countries and has happened in the US before, but the people actually should have a vote on if they want the Olympics to come or not. And I think that that's a way to get the public's actual opinion. And I know our voting system, I have a whole nother thought about that, but nonetheless. So, but I do think that that's a way, instead of polls of like 800 people, surveys of 400 people saying 80% wants this, or 70% wants that. I think with something that big, where, and again, I'm quoting our leaders that say all of Utah will be involved, I think then the people should have a say on if they want it or not.
Well, you know what I wish, Jen, because you bring up a really good point, but I wish before people can vote, people need to get educated.
Yes.
So because people just vote, oh, do you think it would be fun to bring the Olympics here? I think most people would be excited and say, sure. So I think what we need before that happens is people to have an opportunity to really learn about what it really means and how it will impact them. And I don't just mean for the 2 or 3 weeks that the Olympics is here, but how it will impact them on a grand scale, and literally in a lifetime and their children's lifetimes, because it will impact us in, I'm thinking kind of every area. I think it will really impact virtually every aspect of our lives. And in what way? And make sure that we want to sign on to the costs, that we get the benefits, but make sure everyone knows the cost. And the least we can do is contact our legislators and make sure that they know the costs and that they are held accountable for the votes that they make, because they are representing us and they need to do it with some information, some wisdom and prudence, and they need to hear from their constituents. And any other ideas that anybody has of how we can get the word out there and how we can help be involved in this, please let me know, because I'm very interested in everyone's ideas of how we can educate people. And feel free to share this and help people get educated, help them to know what it really does take to bring the Olympics here, and make sure that we understand the long-term ramifications. That's our job as citizens.
Yep.
Jen, thank you so much. You are such a great guest as always, but you are just a wealth of great information. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Have a beautiful day, and remind everyone that you are the guardians of your liberty, and we need to stand up and be sure and guard it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.